everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be learning about action and long exposure photography. Now before we get right into the lesson, there's just one thing that I need you to do. You can pause this video and download something called Slow Shutter Cam. It will be used in the video. Let's get right into it. So action photography is all about capturing subjects in motion. And the good thing is action photography on our iPhones is actually pretty straightforward. So for this type of photography, we want to capture fast-moving subjects using the burst mode on our iPhone. So all we need to do is press and hold the burst button on your phone to get burst shots, then you can manually select your favorite frame to get a clear, crisp action shot on your iPhone. Next up, long exposure photography. Typically, if we had a real camera, we would just prop it on a stable tripod, slow down the shutter speed to allow more light to hit this lens, and take some long exposure shots. However, the long exposure feature on your iPhone was released in iOS 11 and can be used to take some awesome long exposure and nighttime shots. So all you need to do is take a live photo, then you swipe up on that photo and select long exposure, and there you'll have a long exposure shot on your iPhone. Okay, I do think that DSLRs are still much better than this, but this is an iPhone course after all, and the live photo option is a quick and easy way for capturing long exposure shots. However, to get better quality results, I would highly recommend an app called Slow Shutter Cam. And Slow Shutter Cam is one of the best free apps for taking long exposure photos, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So the reason why we use Slow Shutter Cam is because one, it gives us creative control. We can choose any shutter speed we want from 1 to 2 seconds up to even 30 and even more than that. And the second advantage is that Slow Shutter Cam gives us much better image quality. So those are the main two advantages of using Slow Shutter Cam as opposed to the live photos. There are also a couple of things that we need to take into consideration when we use this app. For instance, when we use live photos, we don't necessarily need to be on a tripod. It will work handheld, which is extremely convenient. However, using Slow Shutter Cam, we want to be locked down on a stable tripod in order to get the steadiest shot possible. Alright, so after having your camera set down on the tripod, that's step 1, and step 2 is to get a remote release. Now, what most photographers use is just a pair of headphones because they're not an additional purchase and they come with your iPhone. They're relatively cheap. And all you have to do is plug them into your phone and then click the volume button to get a remote release. Alright, so now that we have both our tripod and our remote release, we're able to take a steady shot, which is the key to any long exposure image. So with that being said, there are a few controls that you need to know and understand in Slow Shutter Cam before taking your shot, so let's go take a look at them right now. So the first one is our capture mode, and we're going to go ahead and choose motion blur. That's going to give us the best effect for this scenario with the waterfall. And the second option is our blur strength. So what blur strength is going to do is going to give us the ability to adjust how much blur is going to be in that final result. For this, as we're shooting a waterfall, I want a lot of blur in that water, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the maximum effect. So our next option is our shutter speed. So we did learn about shutter speed in a very early lesson, but when I talk about long exposure and choosing a long shutter speed, what that will do is actually extend the period of time that we're capturing and recording and showing us the final image. So the final result will be an expanded period of time compressed into a single frame. So rather than just choosing any shutter speed, let's go ahead and demo some of the shutter speeds so that we can actually see what the effect is going to be. So the first shutter speed I'm going to choose is 1/8 of a second. So that shutter speed is so fast that we're not going to be recording a lot of motion in that water. So let's go to capture it and take a look. Then we go ahead and click save, and then we're going to clear. So the next shutter speed I'm going to choose is like a middle of the road shutter speed, around 4 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and capture that. Again, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to clear. I'm going to go back into my settings and I'm going to choose a long exposure. Let's do 15 seconds. And again, I'm going to choose that volume up button to remotely trigger this. And we're going to wait 15 seconds. And what's cool about this is that you can really see the entire exposure, the entire image, all of that motion blur develop right in front of your eye. Then we're going to go ahead and click save. And then clear. we should take a look at is that of 1/8 of a second shutter speed, that really fast shutter speed. And like I mentioned before, it's going to capture some motion blur, but not nearly as much as the other two that we chose. So right away we can see that when we zoom in a little bit, we do have motion. It's not a static shot anymore. It's actually not bad. It gives us energy to the scene without blowing out too much detail. But for me personally, it's not enough motion blur to that scene. Typically when you have water, especially fast moving water, choosing something like 2 or 3 seconds is going to give us a better effect. So that being said, let's move on to the next image. So here we have a 4-second exposure. So as you can tell, compared to that first image, having 4 seconds is giving us a lot more motion blur. It's smoothing out that water, it's simplifying that composition, and I prefer this over that first image. Moving on to our last image, that 15-second exposure. It's going to be a little bit harder to tell. It's not as drastic as an effect as the difference between that first and second exposure, and the reason is that water is moving so fast. So after about 3, 4, 5 seconds, choosing anything longer than that is not going to be as big as an effect as it will be from shooting at 1/4 or 1/8 of a second. So choosing something in between 3 and 5 seconds may even actually save you some time. Again, it's all about creative control. You should go ahead and experiment and choose multiple exposures while you're in that scene. Then when you get back later, you can take a look and see which one you prefer. Alright, so that's it for the lesson. As you saw, Slow Shutter Cam opens up a lot of creative possibilities for us, and it's an app that I absolutely love when it comes to adding motion blur to landscape scenes, either to just simplify the composition or add a bit more dynamic energy to it. I hope you learned more about action photography and how to capture long exposure images on your iPhone. As always, I encourage you to get out of your seat and apply what you've learned today in this lesson to your photos. See you in the next lesson where we'll learn about the panoramic setting on your iPhone. As always, have a great day.